Dobro jutro. Dobro jutro, good morning. And warm welcome. I've just returned from Brussels and I attended Transatlantic Conference. And it struck me there that people in a Brussels bubble think that we go to sleep and wake up with the thought of Europe. But I would say that, unfortunately, that's not really realistic. That we care about our day problems and many times forget to think about Europe. Because Europe, united, strong, and the one which wants and can collaborate with other countries, and of course the states amongst ourselves, is really important pillar of prosperity, peace, and security. And we do forget that too often. And I'm really happy that AmCham Slovenia is the seat of all AmChams in Europe, not only of the 28, but of 43, because Bosnia and Herzegovina just joined last month. So we are basically promoting two important things: collaboration and optimism. And in that, also for us, it's important that AmCham Slovenia, as a business community of optimism and opportunities, promotes the same values, collaboration. That's why I'm really happy that so many of us are here today, because if we want to really bring positive change to our country and to Europe, it's really important that people from business, academia, representatives of state, and civil society do have an open dialogue. And today is just about that. I'm also really happy that we can welcome amongst ourselves so many representatives of different countries. And with that, let me say a warm welcome to the representatives of Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Switzerland, and United States of America. And especially warm welcome to the ambassadors of the respective countries of Canada, France, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Republic of Kosovo, and Montenegro. I think that this is a really great start of talking about global challenges, but with notion of collaboration and optimism. And when we talk about collaboration, there is a special thank you I need to say. And that is to a special lady, our president, Nevenka Kržan. Thank you, Nevenka, for being our great support. Thank you also for being our great partner. And today you are not just wearing a hat of President of AmCham Slovenia, but also as our sponsor who enabled this event, KPMG, a great company, consultant company that we all know for great trust that we can rely on you. And thank you, really, a round of applause for our president. And I know that I can always trust also to special man in the audience right now, but he'll come to the podium and I will leave you in the capable hands of Jaka Repanšek. Jaka, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dobro jutro also on behalf of our panel. I was preparing for today's event in quite a marvelous environment. Over the weekend, I was flying our little Piper, it's a training aircraft, from Portorož to Pula, and all around Kvarner and Istra for 2 days, especially during the night. I was doing something that we call night VFR training. So basically the point is you fly at night. And you can only rely on a few things. You can rely on your instruments. You can rely, above all, on your self-confidence, training, knowledge, and experience. And while I was flying for those 2 days, I was thinking of all the analogies between flying a small plane and our topic today. There's also something we call wake turbulence in flying. It's something that occurs when you fly a small plane behind a big one, sort of like landing a Cessna behind an Airbus on Brnik Airport immediately after that one. I can tell you it shakes like hell. And here's another analogy with Slovenia. In comparison to the global economy, and even to our fellow member states in the European Union, We are merely a Piper Tomahawk with 2 seats, or 2 million people if you want, flying behind and with big planes and big turbulences. So what will be the most important for us to get the plane to its destination of success is what a pilot of a small plane needs in night flight training and all sorts of turbulences. Inner strength, which I guess means strength as a nation, excellent knowledge, best instruments, which can translate into best technology, cooperation with co-pilot, which means we need to cooperate among ourselves, and cooperation with the tower. I guess the analogy would be European Commission or some other important institution in the EU. Perfect map of destination, which could translate into strategy, and above all, stability in the air and strong confidence in knowing where he is going and where he wants to land. And boy, are we living in turbulent times. Turning on the news yesterday felt like I was going back to the Cuban crisis of '62. Well, I wasn't born there, but read a lot about it. 2 Russian planes with soldiers landing in Caracas, nationalisms of all sorts and kinds on the rise before EU elections. All of you driving BMWs may have something to do also with national security, cooling of major economies, and don't even get me started on Brexit. And the list just starts here. It is unpredictability which is paralyzing economic development, but it is also becoming a constant. Therefore, key issues which we will address today for Slovenia and the European Union are undoubtedly relations with the strengthening the European Union, relations with the US, challenges of increased Chinese presence in Europe, relations with Russia, relations with Turkey, upcoming EU elections, and nationalisms which are on the rise, Brexit, lack of structural reforms, volatility of euro, and above all, demographics. But it is not our goal, Aisha, today to be pessimistic. It is our goal to be optimistic, to look into the future with optimism and see if Slovenian economy has necessary answers to global challenges. According to a recent KPMG survey, majority of Slovenian CEOs are aware that we operate in a geopolitically volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and they are making strategic choices for the future. Some of the questions which I will address with my excellent guests, therefore, are: does the economy know how to accept all of the above stated and respond to it? Global economic growth, where or when will it end? What could be the main catalyst of instability in the world and in the near future? And do we have to look for answers in the economy and or in politics? Let me invite and introduce my distinguished guests today. Nevenka Kržan, President of AmCham Poslovni, Senior Partner at KPMG. Professor Dr. Mojmir Mrak from the Academic Unit for Money and Finance, Faculty of Economics, University of Ljubljana. Welcome. Blaž Brodnjak, President of the Management Board, NLB DD. Last but not least, Mr. Sandi Češko, President at Studio Moderna Group. Welcome. I think, I have to, actually, I think I have to mention one more thing. You can all pose or you can all send us questions. It's on the application called Slido. I think you're going to get some instructions on the screen. You can download that application and then send us some interesting questions. We will address them at the end of our round table. So the last 10 minutes, I think we're going to dedicate to whatever you would like to add, or if there's something you would like to ask our distinguished guests. And let me start with Professor Dr. Mrak. World economic management, economic climate in the last years is undergoing large changes. In principle, it's changing from a system which was based on international rules with a strong role of international organizations, so-called rule-based system, into a system based on agreements and power, so-called deal-based system. What kind of challenges does that bring to Slovenia and European Union, and how can we be prepared for that? How can we become better in that kind of a changed system?
Yeah, well, you have already in your introduction giving a lot of, not just indications, but a lot of words about the fastly growing changes in the world. I would maybe a little bit elaborate on this, what you are saying about this big change in the, I would say, global economic governance, which is undergoing, and which is undergoing, I would say, in the last few years, much faster than this was the case maybe a decade ago. Yeah, I would say, you know, after the Second World War, the international economic governance, which was established, it was basically a governance which was based on kind of agreed rules, and they were agreed, of course, among the major players at that time. And these were, in a way, implemented through the international institutions. Now, I'm not talking here just about the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, exchange rates developments. You know, the IMF was a kind of the guardian of the exchange rates developments. The World Bank was taking care about you know, development of the after Second World War ruined economies. And then, of course, it was already at that time also idea to have what turned out 50 years later as the World Trading Organization, but we should not forget that we had for several decades before that GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So my point is that the world was really operating under the kind of rules, kind of based on international organizations, and that was the system which was in a way very predictable. So the predictability was a framework which was also a very good framework for the globalization issues. So I think the globalization, the way when it went, was really very much kind of supported with this international economic environment. I would say the kind of the peak of this were the 90s. So this was the 90s, the WTO was established, you have this policy rules which were governed at that time by the so-called Washington Consensus. And so that was an environment which was also, and that's I would like to underline in as our context, it was also a good environment for small economies.
That's what I was...
Small economies can always operate much better in an environment which is predictable. And then, of course, from that time on, I would think there was a number of things which are showing that we are going into a different direction. Very often, this is linked more or less to the Trump coming on the presidents as the U.S. But this development started already quite before. Here, I would just say a few things. One of the major issues why this old system has started to crack down is that we are really moving from towards a much more multipolar world. The emerging economies, especially China, India, are becoming much more powerful than they were. And what is very important, these new powers are of a different origin than different objectives than we were considering in this transatlantic group of EU and the US. Globalization started to show also some negative implications, not just positive one. You know, this what was going on with issues related to the diversification of countries has started to develop these negative things, this populism which has coming up. So these were the issues that the world has starting to change. And then, of course, within this context, also then these changes, particularly in the US, have strengthened the issues. So this new world, which is in my view kind of development, is really going away from this rule-based approach. We are seeing this, a number of multilateral institutions are under one or another pressure. We have WTO, which is basically dead at the moment. I mean dead and operational. We are having basically arrangements when the trade arrangements are being done completely differently. Out of multilateral, we are going much more towards the bilateral trade of deals. NAFTA, we are talking about then the new arrangements between Europe and and the US. So much more transaction by transaction, by deals, and of course this kind of an environment is much less predictable.
Such a movement, of course, is also being observed within the European Union. So we cannot only talk about United States or China or other forces from outside being the ones going kind of forcing us to a deal-based system. I mean, we're seeing that as a process also within the 28 or 27, 28. It depends on the 14th of April. We'll see actually if it's going to be 27 or 28. So my sub-question is, can a small nation like Slovenia or another small, comparable small member state in the EU actually survive within such a deal-based system if it is not really tied into a strong multilateral environment or organization like EU? So it is in our core interest to basically be in the core of the EU and trying to make it as strong as possible. A small nation of 2 million, or this Piper I was mentioning with 2 seats, cannot really fly with the big birds, can it?
Maybe first a comment on the EU, and then with this context, of course, it's an issue for Slovenia. I think the EU was generally an arrangement which was pretty much based on rules, and if the world is moving towards outside of this, towards new arrangements, this is definitely an environment which is not good for the EU as such. We are seeing this on a number of issues. And Slovenia, of course, being part of the EU, as you said, I would say it's really in our really strategic interest to have the EU which will be efficient. We have now very clear indications also from some already businesses in large countries. I'm talking from Germany, basically saying, that these things which are going towards the environment which is less based on rules would be not really would be bad for businesses. And this is done for the large countries of the EU, which are in the global terms again not really very large. This is even more the problem for the Slovenia. So yes, Slovenia is here extremely interested to have this, but we have to understand that also within the EU there are big changes among the institutions of the EU, European Parliament, Council. The relations are changing. What I am also very much concerned that the relationship between the Council and the Commission change. And one thing which in my view for the small countries like Slovenia was very unfortunate during this mandate of the Commission is that the Commission has become political.
Well, we actually feel that probably more than some other member states, but we feel it pretty strong. A lot of issues underlining the political character of the Commission. We'll see with the new Commission. Yeah, the Spitzenkandidaten of the new for the new elections are saying they will strengthen the rule of law more than probably the political sort of aspect of Juncker's Commission.
Look, personally, I was when Juncker said, when became a president, that his Commission will be more political, that I must say at that time I consider this as good, because I consider that will be political in the sense that he will have strong political personalities in the group. If you remember, he tried to brought in a number of prime ministers and so on, so this was, in my view, okay. But the problem was, which I learned later on, and we learned this, I think, in Slovenia pretty much, that the Commission was acting politically. Don't forget that Juncker has even proposed to merge the post of the President of the European Council and the President of the Commission. I think this is for small countries extremely bad, if not disastrous.
We will come back to EU politics. I mean, European Commission has always been also a political body. It's not only technical, but yes, definitely this has been strengthened in the last term. Mr. Brodnjak, if I may, basically now we kind of lay the foundations on a very global scale of the European Union, politics of Slovenia as a nation, as an entity. We're going to kind of shrink it now more to an economic aspect. Slovenia, as we of course underlined, is a small country, has small political influence, has small economic influence, a market of 2 million. How can Slovenia, through the eyes of a large bank like NLB, kind of play among those big players? What are you in NLB focusing on to survive in that environment?
Well, first, NLB is a small bank.
In European context, yeah. In Slovenia, it's a big one.
In a European context, yes. Maybe in even a regional context, we are a small bank. Yet, of course, systemic bank in a small country. My message to everyone here is you are on your own. believing in level playing field in global game, forget. I'm talking to EC frequently. It's not a level playing field. It's only if you're loud enough, ambitious enough, that you may be, skewing this a bit in your favor. Otherwise, you're too small to play. So you have to be actually focusing on, your own turf and your own capacities and capabilities to compete globally. Guess what? The government will not help you as well. We are talking about reforms for years. These reforms are not happening. We are talking about cosmetic corrections, not reforms. I'm just talking about, taxation of, talent. Look at it. Take, for example, a net pay, at a reasonable level of a manager that's internationally competitive. Take the gross pay, tag to it, and compare to Poland, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, or Austria. It's ridiculous. We are in a global game competing on your own, and what does it take to be able to compete? Talent. Because we are competing with brands that are much more established, and these brands are coming from the countries like Austria, like Switzerland, like Germany, and guess what? Of course, now China and the others as well. Now, China alone educates 2.5 million PhDs every year, and is not a hostage of electoral cycles. They have a 100-year view. They don't have a 2-year view. We have next morning view depending on the poll that was just conducted, right? When it comes to politics. So this is different perception and different context. So in business terms, we need to be on our own, meaning small. We have to be above average ambitious, and we have to deliver quality because we cannot compete on price. If we don't compete on price, we can compete only on quality, right? And this requires talent. And that's why, of course, you need to focus, and we need to focus on being able to retain and attract talent that's going to differentiate us, because guess what? Slovenia is exporting 35 billion every year. For the ones that know what's the level of the GDP of Slovenia, this will indicate to you that this is one of the most open economies globally. Mm-hmm. And that's why we are very much dependent on global, of course, trends. And what we are missing then again is that we are fully, floating in these seas. I was not there even to go to the skies, right? Where it's very unpredictable, very insecure, and you have to be much more innovative, flexible, and adaptable to be able to succeed. And, here I am admiring countries that, have the substance that's called domestic market, like, for example, Poland. You didn't feel crisis in Poland.
Well, it's got 40 million domestic market.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So the ambition of Slovenia should be, if you ask me, this is my firm belief, can we be a part of a bigger domestic market?
Mr. Brodnik, former Yugoslavia, 22 million people, counting plus or minus a few million. NLB, of course, he's not a European player, but it can be a regional player. So it's a 22 million market. What are you guys doing there? What are your plans in this new global challenges that we're focusing now?
That's exactly what I was aiming at. So yes, we are a regional player in a very specific region, geopolitically, historically, traditionally a very volatile one. But we believe that we know what it takes to be successful there. And we firmly believe that, as Scandinavians were able to work as a free economic zone, despite the fact that they have not been all in European Union and only one country having euro, this is the only future. And this is from many angles the only future. If Europe means it seriously, we are really interested in stability and integration and collaboration. There has to be stronger integration agenda for Balkans. There is no other way out. If you want to keep this region stable and above all, start working on, and you can only do that if you, of course, on one side provide security, and now here I'm not talking about NATO umbrellas and so on, but you need to bring welfare, a standard of people to a certain level, that people are going to be willing to stay there, and secondly, they will, be happy with the life.
You know the environment, you know the history, you know the people. Yeah. We know the people, the environment, the history, and the talent. So that is a logical focus for your group, definitely. We're going to narrow down Nevenka now even more, going from a state level or European Union level, bank level, regional level, to CEOs, to management. Okay, KPMG, I think, yearly performs an international survey in which over 1,300 CEOs of the largest global firms are asked about their concerns and challenges about economic outlook. Can you share, in a practical, short way, with us what the last survey key findings are, and where are Slovenian companies and CEOs in that survey with the perspective of our topic today. Global challenges, do we have the answers? Please.
Thank you, Jaka. Good morning from my side as well, and thank you for coming to this event in such a great number. So, yes, my professional life is almost all the time about the risks. So I don't want to share or to say what are the risks that the global CEOs expressed in the survey. I would like to talk about the challenges. There are three main areas they were addressed. First of all, and interesting, that most of the CEOs in the last survey said that geopolitical threat or challenge is what they should focus on. So the increasing territorialism, what we heard from Professor Mrak and from Mr. Brodniak, is definitely one of the challenge. The second is cybersecurity. So let's say over the 70% of the CEOs from the States, United States, said that it's not if, but when they will have a cyber attack. As well, it's interesting that that risk is very spread in Australia, but not so common expressed in Europe. And the next, and what is, from my point, very important, is everything is the change of generation. It is, we are getting millennials as a customers, we are getting millennials as a workforce, and we have to focus, and the companies have to change their ways of behaving, either internally or either to customers.
Or both.
Or both, yeah, definitely. So let me just, and here we are coming to the maybe another term which I don't like. This is the disruptive technology. I think we should say it is a transformation. And here we come to Slovenian companies. I guess that Slovenian CEOs and companies are aware of those challenges, but maybe a bit too slow, not too, I think we have to be agile. I think that's the right word, that we have to speed up the processes, how to prepare the vision and the path, the strategy to get to those new environment, new reality. I would like maybe to conclude this part with one sentence I've get from the survey. One of our CEOs said, we want to be a better company, not a bigger company. That means that we want to serve our clients better, and with that, we will grow.
We want to be a better country, not a bigger one, okay? Yeah. Well, maybe even a bigger one, but a better one. Mr. Češko, last but not least, coming down to the very practical level, you do a lot of international business, you export to many markets. We talked, you were just on your way from Asia, finally got a chance to talk to you yesterday, so you were always somewhere around. So let me ask you, maybe it's going to be a bit broader. How long, to which extent do you see the economic growth last? How are you preparing for the time when this economic growth, this demand will not be as strong as it is now, 2020, 2021, from your entrepreneurial perspective as a global player, exporter in your field of business?
Well, hello everybody. As you know, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a challenger. So also challenge this question and saying I don't care. You know, why? I think that we live in the world of stereotypes, and all what was said here, also Professor Mrak, you know, it's very valuable, and it's very important analysis. But you know, with science and with statistics, I like to say statistics, you know, following all this data, it's like a bikini. It shows everything except the most important.
And that is?
You know? So I never followed, you know, I never followed statistical data. I never followed this. Because why? Because, you know, we are small. This is one thing. Although I don't accept anymore this stereotype, because today small is it doesn't, big and small doesn't matter anymore. Why? First, we have to, let's say, I would like to explain this in the farmer's logic, because this is the way how I'm thinking the world. Always farmer's logic. And as Bill Clinton once said, it's important to follow not the headlines, but the trend lines. And this is a big, difference, because people always look what other people are doing, what is in the headlines, what is fashionable, And I was always doing something else which was not fashionable. And when I made a transaction, my investor said, Sandy, it's better to be rich than famous, And today, a lot of my competitors are very famous because they're investing a lot in their brands, let's say in the mattress industry. And in the West, they're much more famous, but their bottom lines are, pure disasters, while we are profitable. So what's happening? Why the old paradigm, this big and small, why all the statistical data today are significantly less important? Because all these analyses and all this know-how that we are still, the management, especially in the West, is using today, is based on the old assumptions. And old assumption is that live in the predictable environment and economy. We live now, the situation has changed. We live in the middle of the shift of the paradigm. So we live in dynamic environment. In dynamic environment, everything changes every day. And there are opportunities all around which didn't exist before. And Studia Moderna was driven by these opportunities. First, in Eastern Europe, I was fighting with big multinational corporations like RTL, all largest Western TV stations. Today, I'm using this know-how from Eastern Europe, to grow my business with Dormeo in United States, in Canada, in Western world, in Japan, all over globally. And we are using experience from our markets, what we have learned here, to change these industries also in the West in the most efficient ways. Dormeo today is sold in the States in the largest retail chains as a luxury product. The minimum retail price is $2,000. It goes to $4,000. The same is in Canada. In Netherlands, we are selling to our partners is the largest discount retailer, which never sold a mattress for more than let's say 200 euros. Ours is the cheapest one, is 400. So these are the possibilities which are around. Because of why? Because the paradigm is changing. The old things, the old model doesn't work anymore. And if we look, so why the growth? Let's say I'm not focused on the growth on the, let's say, in the mattress and furniture industry, which is carrying. In UK, if you look the trends last few years, all retailers in this category lost the revenues. They have, terrible bottom lines. We grew every year 50%. Let's say, if we look at the automotive industry, of course, automotive industry, we see now negative trends. But look at another thing. Today we have 10% of the cars, or even less, I think, are electrical cars. In 5 years, it will be 30% of electrical cars. So this is electric cars. So this is a new niche, a new opportunity to grow. So you have to decide which perspective you take. But if you only look, these general big statistical trends, you should be miserable.
All right, thank you very much. I mentioned before that we want to be a better, not a larger country. However, I'm actually very worried that we'll be a smaller country because of the next topic we need to raise, and this is a question for all four of you, is demographics. This is one of the key challenges we have, not only in Slovenia, but generally looking in European Union level, and it's something we need to tackle now. It relates also to what Mr. Brodnik said before. I mean, acquiring great talent from abroad is something you need when you have statistically 1.5 children per family in this country, and that trend is, been there for a long time now. So right now, as we are speaking, President Pahor is holding a summit in his presidential palace on demographics. He's basically kind of talking to to many political parties, and the title of that event right now in presidential palace is Measures for Undisturbed Reproduction of Population. Measures for Undisturbed Reproduction of Population. What a great talent! I mean, what a great title. Your imagination can now, of course, think about all the things that are hidden in that title, but this is actually a very serious topic, okay? Just a few statistical things. I mean, European average shows 35 persons out of 100 are older than 65. Slovenian birth rate has fallen to 1.5 child per family. Migrations, which is a huge topic in European Union, it will be a huge topic at the elections, I'm pretty sure, in May now. Just listen to this fact. Even 5,000 new migrant workers per year in Slovenia would not help improve the ratio between active and retired population. 5,000 per year would not help improve that ratio. So we have immigration, and I'm not only talking about general immigration, I'm talking about immigration of highly skilled professionals, which we need to incentivize to come here. And we're talking about all other demographic challenges that we have. And Professor Mrak, I'll let you start here with probably a broader perspective on this issue, but this is probably, when we talk about global challenges in Slovenia, almost one of the first two or three that I can think about.
Well, Sandy will say that I will talk about statistics. I think they did not mention any statistical data at that time. I was really talking about the trends, and the trends are definitely going in a way what we were discussing here. Well, yeah, aging is one of the issues which is this global, if you want, a kind of a mega trend. I think what Lars said on these political cycles, this is one of the areas where these political cycles, very short one, 4-year cycles, are extremely bad thing to tackle the issue, let's say, appropriately. I will just give you a Slovenian example. You know, we are putting from the budget every year more than, I think, 1 billion to the pension fund. So what means that the existing system is not sustainable. And we have a very nice political view of the previous government, of this government. You know, this system is sustainable till 2025. Yeah, it will not break up the 2025. But this de facto takes as business as usual that we are putting 1 billion from a budget for that purposes. So this is definitely not an issue which is good, which is appropriate.
What about this mini reform? I'm sorry to interrupt you. There was a mini reform now. Even the authors of the reform don't call it a reform because it's so mini. But at least, you know, it says something that is a step towards trying to do something with the pension reform. Working until 67, 40 years of work. Is this sufficient? Obviously not.
Look, I'm very interested for the reform because I'm coming to that situation to start using or not using this. I think I simply know, or we know not enough what is really behind those things which were for now publicly. But personally, I can say I have some problems in terms of the fiscal sustainability of the things which came out to the public. As I said, I'm personally very glad for this, but I don't think that is sustainable. This, 3 years working further on, definitely we will have to work longer. We will have to make a scheme that those who can continue working will be able to work. But we have to be very careful here that we will not use this as a system that we will close the door or reduce the door for younger coming to the working age, because it's also the issue of the as I said, sustainability of this. Another thing which we don't talk in the context of the aging is, I think the pension reform on this segment should be closely coordinated with the health reform, because health sector in the context of the aging is becoming completely different than it was maybe 15 years ago. And generally Slovenia here is relatively, again, more exposed than even the EU average, because our demographic is, I think, one of the 3 or 4 the worst in the EU member states, the worst in the sense of the aging. So the whole this issue of migrations or immigrations, we will have to tackle it a little bit more seriously. Here the immigration is considered something which is by definition bad, right? Of course, particularly based on this the 2015 wave. But I think we will have to look, particularly in the context of this Balkan area, I think we should be pretty much take the opportunity, the interest to attract the profiles from those areas which would be interested for this area. We see, I can tell you in the faculty, we have each year now, I think about 400 foreigners of this, quite a number from this area, and I can tell you, when you speak with these students, a lot of them are interested one way or another to stay in case that, that they will have a proper way to operate.
Thank you very much. I mean, of course, pension reform, we can reform and reform and reform, but that's not going to solve the demographic issue. Now, Nevenka, from your point of view, I mean, there must be some trends that you see, that you analyze, that you advise. Where do you see, besides tax reform, which we always mention at our AmCham breakfasts as one of the key things for most talented people, but where else do you see solutions for our demographic trends, which are horrific?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that from the, let's say, microeconomic perspective, we have to be aware of the changes of the structure of our workforce. The new words they are appearing are that the blue colors will be replaced by the metal colors. What that means that a lot of artificial intelligence, robotics will replace some working positions. So the data scientists, they will be the core people they will be looked for. Let's say, if I can tell you for my profession, we are employing more and more IT scientists because the processes are so use a lot of not artificial intelligence, not just predictive analytics.
You're employing them at KPMG?
Definitely. So I think that in the society, we have to look about we are coming to the educational system, how we will address those changes as well in our academic sphere. So to maybe have more open spaces for those professions. As well, one of from the survey you mentioned, Jaka, one of the significant point was that global CEOs are predicted that the artificial intelligence will create more work spaces than to reduce them. So it will be a different trend. And I think that we have to be aware in all of the spheres of our society.
Mr. Češko, thank you very much. Is increased productivity, automatization, digitalization, are those, in your opinion, at least intermediate answers to our, demographic trends, long-term answers? How do you see it from a very business perspective?
Well, first, let's address the question of the demographics. I mean, we have to approach this in a non-political and a non-emotional way. Today we have basically two views. One is, let's say, the very left view, which thinks and approaches this as we are obliged to open our doors and to be some kind of red cross for everyone who wants to enter our territories. On the other hand, we have completely populistic view, which is against any immigration. I think that we should take a case of, let's look at Singapore, and they approached this issue 30 years ago, very in a rational way. They came to the conclusion that a nation of 2.5 million doesn't have critical mass big enough to, for functioning. So they opened a big immigration process, and today Singapore became from 2.5 million nation 35 years ago to 5.6, and they're managing this. So it's very rational, very economical question, as Professor Marak said. Do you want to have pensions, or certain system that can function or not? So that's one thing. In terms of the productivity, I mean, we have to be prepared on one thing. As Henry Kissinger said recently about AI, he compared AI. He said you can compare the impact of artificial intelligence with the discovery of Columbus in the with his impact of discovery Columbus on the impact on the Aztec civilization in Latin America, and we know what has happened. So these are the changes which are in front of us today. So we have to, simply embrace them.
Mr. Drolek, if you can maybe elaborate on this, because we started with your point about, attracting talent. So we have statistically 5,000 people coming in would not help improve the ratio, but it's not the 5,000, it is the who comes and how to attract them. If we can become, or if we can maybe state this a bit more practical, so what are the measures we can impose to tackle those challenges from a very practical point of view, as you see it every day during your business in Slovenia and in the region?
Well, very practical, let's make love. I've got 3 children, right? But I couldn't persuade my wife with the 4th one. But, you have to actually be a brand attractive destination for people first, if you want to attract especially above average talent. But we have to also deal with the fact that, that we are living on a planet that is overpopulated. So we have a very well developed part of the world that is crying there is lack of talent, but we are talking about ecological sustainability of existing population. So what are we talking about? We are confused globally, right? And this is, of course, we are not going to solve this in Slovenia, definitely. But, then you have a chicken and an egg problem, and you have a general standard welfare problem. The better people live, the more they protect their living standard. They start talking about wellness, fitness, travel. Guess what? It's more expensive with more children. It's more difficult to plan your evening training if you have 3 kids. So it's a society of spoiled, good living people, that are not interested in having more children. So then we are touching then where will the talent come from? Are we then really open enough to start talking about, really bringing, immigrating people from the parts of the planet that are overpopulated, because this would be the only valid global view and global perspective, because otherwise we are not solving the global problem. We're just looking on our, working on our local maximum, but not global maximum, right? And then, of course, also work on the agenda on how actually make these people motivated to be here in Slovenia. And being as a small open society, small open market, of course, we need to work on the only legitimate national interest of any such society, which is global international competitiveness. And nothing else. I don't buy any other argument.
With measures like you mentioned, and on. Which else?
Exactly.
Taxes you mentioned.
I mentioned taxes. I mentioned also...
It's a beautiful country to ski and fly around and do whatever you like. What else?
It's a quality. It's also how you position the country as a vision. We have a couple of natural competitive advantages which we are simply, not addressing, such as logistics. What are we doing with logistics? Just playing around. Hamburg is actually, adding value to 70% of the goods they bring to the port and export from the port. We are not doing anything in this respect. We are just moving the goods from A to B, and in the meantime, still discussing whether we need a 2nd railway, while we should have the 3rd one already 20 years ago, if logistics were the key strategic industry of the country. Then the 5-star tourism. Ljubljana is, for crying out loud, the only capital in the world where you can fly in, and in less than half an hour, you can experience all 3 typical European climate types: Mediterranean, continental, and alpine. In less than a half an hour drive. In less than a 50-minute drive, you can swim in Adriatic Sea or Alpine Lake, or ski at 2,000 meters above sea level, or be amidst of the most beautiful vineyards in Europe. This is a unique value proposition for everyone, but we are just not developing this in a structured way. The 3rd one is the entire wood value chain, where we simply killed it instead of and we were exporting logs to Austria instead of being the champion in this respect. The 3rd most forested country in Europe, and so on. We don't have a vision and clear view what this country is all about first. To work on the vision. And then be working on attracting talent to these industries. And then, of course, all the global opportunities that are there that you could facilitate for the startups, for the digital sphere that is enormous. It's a universe of opportunities, what Sandy is talking about. You are not constrained anymore to local, borders. But for the classical goods, what you can export, it helps if you have domestic market as well. And that's why you would have to develop the region to become a domestic market as well. So you have to become an employer that is attractive, but for this you also have to have a clear story. Clear story. We don't have a story as a country.
And whose main, I would say, responsibility it is for the clear story? Not just, don't say politics, but who? How can we make that story more visible? We can talk on round tables like this for a long, long time about the story. Who? Yeah.
Well, it's all of us. It's a collective responsibility. It's leadership. No? That's why I am raising this up at any occasion. I mean, there should be a critical mass of people that are interested enough in what this country is going to be. You know, whether our kids are going to stay here or not. I listen to, you know, my colleagues, fellow managers. The kids are studying in London and they're staying there.
Great, thank you very much. Great answers. Professor Mak, or Nevenka, please, and then Professor Mak. Yeah.
To mention, I agree. I think we have to have a vision and a strategy. So a goal and a path to go there. And when I always say, oh, does Slovenia have a strategy? I found a document, I don't know if you are all aware of. This is Slovenian Strategy 2030. I read it, and I haven't found the word digitalization.
2030, strategy 30? 230.
230,
Okay, oh,
yes.
yeah. Like
And I don't know if you are aware that we have it, but it was, from my point of view, not a good advertising about this. And I haven't found the word. This is important: digitalization, IT, technology, change of the generations. So I think we should talk, all of us, more about it.
But I feel like almost every conference I go to, at least myself, it's about digitalization. We've been talking about blockchain, digitalization for many years. However, the results are maybe something else. Professor Mrak.
Yeah, well, now Nevenka has taken me a little bit out of my wind because I was I was also wanting to mention that was said. You know, Slovenia had a very clear, I would say, even if on political and economic goals, somewhere up to the EU accession, Euro accession, and so on. That was, you know, that institutionally we achieved. But then from and by the way, by that time, during that time, we also had a pretty solid strategies for Slovenia's development. Of course, they were pretty much guided how to reach the, you know, the objective of the membership, and also the economic agenda was then kind of scheduled that way. You will remember this strategy for the Euro accession, a pretty strong cooperation. But my point, after that, we basically were not anymore able to put together, I would say, a consistent strategic document. We had a document which was lasting till 2013, but not from that time on. So what you were mentioning, that's the previous government started to embark on this. You didn't mention one more thing. We do have a vision, like a Chinese 2050. But please read that vision, and you will see that it is a vision which can be easily used by any of the small EU member states in 98%.
Do we need to rewrite our strategy 2030? Do we need to rewrite it tomorrow? And how are we going to rewrite it? Yesterday, okay. Do we need to rewrite it 2 days ago? All right. I'm sorry, my English is, you know, past tense, present tense. Anyway, do we need to do that? Do we need to do that? And how? Yes, please. I mean, yes. How?
Look, the problem is that we will enter now for the next financial perspective of the EU, again, without our own strategic document we would like to do with the country, because I strongly agree with you that the vision 2030 is not appropriate, and I have made this very clear also publicly and internally before it was published to the minister. So it was not something, you know, because I often hear that, you know, you professors are then taking certain things, you know, what happened before that. So that's, it was basically, and I will be here very, very, very blunt. It was basically a document which was guided very strongly by the OECD. We outsourced to prepare the development strategy to the OECD, which was, of course, now they are, you know, claiming that they have very nice 2030 millennium goals in one of the EU member states, but it's a document which is not for us useful. There is no priorities. If you have 20 priorities, then you don't have any priority. That's a fact. And I very much agree that there are certain areas where we should concentrate on. And we have, you know, this logistic is definitely what was mentioned
And also?
here. Tourism is another one. Then there are also certain areas, probably in this high-tech industry. I think here.
Mr. Brodek mentioned startups and high-tech. Mr. Brodek, please.
I would challenge our mentality first as well. It's not about industries only. It's, you know, whether we can accept successful people. Can we accept successful people in this society?
Can we accept successful
I tell you no. And that's wrong. That's a big problem. That's the biggest problem of mentality of this nation. We are too envious. And without capital substance, in long term, nation cannot survive difficult cycles. Believe me. Whenever German and Austrian politics goes nuts, there is a meeting happening in the woods of Schwarzwald, I guess, you know, with 100 families, you know, that are driving the economy. This is the fact of life. We don't allow people to succeed, and we properly award it for that in order to build substance. The nation needs capital substance at home, because these people that live here and have this substance have different affinity to the society, are contributing to the society, are thinking of quality of life in the society, are investing in this quality of life. Not multinationals. Local stuff, local people. And we don't allow local people to be successful as a matter of a rule in this society, and that's bloody wrong.
Thank you very much. Mr. Češko, please.
Well, this is a very good point, let's say, because what is the key? I don't see how we can write today the strategy for next 10, 15 years, because all this strategy you know, can change ups and down based on the new deal between Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi Jinping. And they will decide, you know, where we will belong.
Will that affect us so very much?
Yes, it will. Of course, it will affect us, because the new zones of the influence are now discussed and negotiated, you know, and now it's like after the Second World War, you know. The question is who will get what and who will come under whose influence, and we see this today in Italy, discussions, etc., etc. So, you know, what is the most important for us? What I think, you know, besides all the things that, let's say, business-wise, Blaž already mentioned, is the culture. You know, the way how small community a Slovenian will function and will make decisions in the world in which everything what we know, it's falling apart, including parliamentarian democracy. So what we see today, there are two trends. One is dictatorship trends and illiberal economies. So these, what we see, the trends which are going around us, all around us, are the rise of populist parties and public unrest. What we see today with Yellow Vest, we see all across Europe. The question is, can Slovenia, with its tradition, you know, which is coming from Krek to self-management to everything, protect, you know, let's say to act like the Venice Republic, like Dubrovnik Republic, to keep, let's say, some kind of consensus, national consensus, and stay democratic, you know, in the Swiss way. And in this turbulence, like Switzerland, like Liechtenstein, like many smaller countries during the wars and the conflict areas, preserve an island of stability, of, you know, common sense, of democracy. Or we will follow these headlines and we'll split ourselves in two parts,
right,
which will be the end of Slovenia.
Populism sometimes does not necessarily mean also bad environment for business, but I'm not trying to get there. It just sometimes we should not confuse those two things. But I agree with you. Please, Mr. Brodniak.
One additional thought. I don't believe that we as a society are mature enough as Swiss society to do this. I frankly don't, because this will going to drag us back or keep us stable, because of the previous mentality feature.
We always dreamed about being Switzerland. What went wrong? I mean, when I was, you know, going to high school, it was Switzerland.
Switzerland is one of the
most.
most.
Do we really want to be that?
Switzerland is one of the most innovative societies on the planet, investing in know-how, in R&D, and attracting talent, understanding the importance of that. So this is, you know, completely different paradigm here. We don't, you know, invest enough first in R&D at all. Secondly, we have not consciously decided to be island in the world of excellence. We don't have this vision. I was listening to the Austrian representative of the tax office, you know. They said as an ambition, we want to be the most effective tax office in the world. This goal, right?
Malta is the most effective tax
But this is a goal.
office in the world. It's a stony island, very, very effective.
No.
Can we do something like that? No, I mean, I'm just saying it's very effective.
I'm just saying that we lack ambitious vision in a sense that it's, providing a statement as a story to the nation and story to the potential people coming to this country and want to stay here. We have a consulate in Banja Luka, in our premises, actually, of Slovenia. We have 300 applicants for work visa in Slovenia every working day. But guess what? These people come and go to Germany because we are not attractive enough, a destination to stay.
Right. We are kind of narrow. We're maybe going back to where we started, and that is Slovenia's role in this kind of turbulent environment. Now, just be very practical. For example, Chinese influence economically is on the rise in European Union. There's a lot of talks about that. There's, I think, also on the European Union level, this will be one of the major discussions now in Brussels when they gather together about what to do with the Chinese influence and how to kind of put that into perspective. So European Union on one side is competing with China. On the other side, China wants to invest into European Union. Then we have United States, which is also redefining its role with China, with European Union, with Asia. And I really want to go back because, sometimes it comes down to a very practical question. Will you take Huawei's 5G technology to build your backbone digital infrastructure or not? Will Nova Ljubljanska Banka be able to finance telecoms or telemachs, technology which might be on the blacklist of European Commission because, it could actually pose some challenges? And, Germany can really buy pretty much what it wants because it is quite strong in negotiating both US, China, India, everybody. Slovenia is not. It's 2 million people. We're very sort of vulnerable to sort of geostrategic decisions we have to make. I would like to hear the comments of you guys on that issue. It's very practical because we're a tiny little piper between this huge, well, you like the sailboats more. We're a tiny little sailboat between all these big boats. Okay, Blasi, let's start with you.
This one is very difficult if we want to understand what Europe wants to be. Because I'm not sure that the Europe knows what it wants to be, in a global context. I was mentioning China in terms of, independence from political cycles, and 100-year view, 3,000 institutes working on the future of China in 100 years from now. Then you have the US, which is entrepreneurial driven, and of course they're able to, in 24 hours, resolve the bank crisis in a big crisis meeting, even if it's excluding nationalization. But then you have Europe, that is taking decisions through 27 parliaments, and and is extremely regulating everything. And for example, banking.
Over-regulation of you is a huge problem, isn't it?
For banking regulation in global context, I was participating in a meeting with the governor of the ECB, Draghi, and the Deutsche Bank representative was clearly stating, guys, you are chopping our legs off in global race. We are competing with Chinese banks, American investment banks, but you are killing us with regulation on one side. And secondly, whenever it comes to an important decision, then you are faced with 27 parliaments. And then you have a monetary policy constellation where ECB, is actually charging for the money you place there, right? Instead of the other way around, and which is completely, of course, recovering public finance of Italy. But what is the toolbox in case the economic cycle cools down a bit stronger than we believe currently? What is the toolbox of the monetary policy to react? Right, and I raised this question to Jean-Claude Trichet, previous governor of the ECB, at certain gathering here in Ljubljana as well, and he said, well, the answer is not monetary, the answer is fiscal, which means unified fiscal policy of Europe. And I said, good luck. You have Italy with 2% deficit, they want to have 3, and you have Germany preaching about the surplus. How will you actually match fiscal policies of 27 countries to be able to react, with a toolbox that is required, and monetary toolbox is, exhausted? What do you do?
Professor Mrak, please.
In case of, I'm not talking about the crisis, but even of, significant cooling down. So I think the toolbox goes even further that we had in the previous crisis. International cooperation environment, completely different than today. Right? Don't forget, when the Lehman Brothers, happened, we had in 1 month the change from G7 to G20. What does it mean? It means that it was clear that to address the problem, there is a need to have these emerging economies on. They were agreed practically over a meeting to increase the firepower of the IMF for 500 billion. I'm just trying to say that the environment for dealing with the crisis at that time was quite different. On the monetary side, what can do the central bank if something happens today? The ECB is already there. Okay, the Fed has a little bit of room now, but what? Additional quantitative easing. Fiscal side, it was not mentioned. Also, the debt, the public debt today, generally, is much higher than it was the debt at that time, much higher. Slovenia has now gone down a little bit, but for the small countries, and now I'll come again to the small countries. One thing, if we like it or not, small countries de facto have to be better if they want to be in a way equal to the global economy. It's just one. Here I will give the data. You will remember that we were basically on the edge of the bankruptcy where our public debt was 40% of GDP. So, Maastricht criteria 60. Who cares about Maastricht criteria if the market not respect? If you are small and in problem, then you're in problem alone. If you are big in problems, then of course, then you drag into problems also somebody else. Spain was a very clear example here. When Spain needed to get into the problem, it was a problem for the EU. If Slovenia gets into a problem, Cyprus it's not a problem for the EU.
Thank you very much. We kind of heard about a paradox, I think. On one side, Slovenia cannot be without a strong European Union. On the other hand, strong European Union over-regulating some fields is choking us. Today they're voting on the copyright directive. I don't know, I know it doesn't affect most of you, but for example, it affects me and my clients a lot. We're talking about 2 articles for 1 year. They're going to define how YouTube and Google and all of those things are going to look like in the European Union in the future. And it's amazing. When you talk to Americans working in those companies, they're just like, what the hell? Yes, the goal is very noble. We need to protect the authors, but the measures we're doing are really sometimes, or GDPR, don't get me started with that, are sometimes like, whoa, what's going on? But okay, this is about a paradox of European Union. You need it, but then again, it chokes you a little bit. So we'll work with that, what we have. But you mentioned public debt, and there is a survey that says that only the countries that have lowered the public debt below 60% of GDP will be able to successfully tackle the next economic crisis, which will come to 2021, 22, because, Mr. Brodner, for example, they will be able to use the measures of the European Central Bank, like buying bonds for pumping money into circulation. We're not there yet. Have we not learned anything from the past crisis? How are you prepared for the eventual new financial crisis, maybe a couple of years?
I believe that the businesses and the banking system have learned the lesson. The governments have not. This is my firm belief, because we are already against investing in consumption that is one-off consumption instead of preparing for the next downturn and working on strategic reforms. And in this respect, I firmly believe that we should, in the good times, an ideal time was 2017. I signed this firmly.
But also now it's a good time. We're still in economic growth.
Yeah, but I don't
Why
see.
Why not now?
I don't see the will, because we are driven by daily polls. And this is something that is not going to happen, obviously, in Slovenia, because we are happy with the level of standard, with the quality of life, and we want to be in a comfort zone. Difficult decisions in this country are very difficult to take. But then coming back to the corporates and the banking sector, we are in a much better shape, standalone. So there are, a couple of systems in the countries, in the national economy. So the businesses have been much more independent from the, financial sector. Slovenian economy was one of the most leveraged in Europe. Now is one of the lowest leveraged in Europe. So the companies, have become much more conservative and are better prepared. So even in the case of a downturn, even if the cash flows, swing by 20 to 30%, I think they will still be bankable on average, right? But then we are talking about banks, which are a completely different shape. At that point of time, big Slovenian banks were exposed to international financial markets with billions of monies to be returned, right? Now we are fully self-funded. NLB alone has the loan-to-deposit ratio of 63%. Retail deposits, Slovenian retail deposits. So we are very strongly funded, very liquid, record levels of liquidity, and strongly capitalized.
You
through
and all
Core Tier 1
other
capital.
banks.
Sorry?
You and all other banks.
I would
in
say that
Slovenia.
the entire
Talking
banking system.
commercial banks now.
Yeah.
Professor, thank you very much. Professor Mrak, very simple question. We're kind of wrapping up. Is there any Slidos that we need to read? There are. Okay, let's wrap it up now and go to Slidos and then come back maybe for the last one. Professor Mrak, banks are in good shape and ready for the upcoming potential crisis. What about the general situation? I mentioned the 60% GDP public debt. What about that?
No, I think if I think the trend for the public debts, that's fine. I think there is also what was said on the financial sector. Companies are today in a much better shape generally. On the macro side, I would still like to mention one crucial difference before the crisis and today, and that is that we had before the crisis current account deficit of 5%. Today, Slovenia has a current account surplus of 7-8%, what is more or less similarly as Germany, which is of course you are a smaller country, but still it's a significant macro difference. But I strongly agree, and again, it's that we are again losing the good years for do something serious. And I was very open on this. Also, this budget for this year, that is it's a nice budget, but it is a budget where is a little bit of a Santa Claus giving to everybody. You saw the very end when there was the local communities refused then to sign in the second chamber. They refused this to give the veto on the referendum because obviously they get too much or too little at the beginning when they agreed, and then they see that everybody is getting from this budget. They said, we should get something more. My point is that we have basically not used this year, the previous year, for something more serious, particularly on the health and on the pension reform. And here I think also if these expenditures will go in this relation would be good. Now they have gone for the going more or less, consumption for those things to please different voting groups.
Professor Mrak,
we lost the period.
The Minister of Finance stated that this is the most optimal budget. In the circumstances, we're still seeing a surplus.
It is, that's definitely. Yeah. But if you are seeing the surplus, which is in circumstances where your growth is de facto much stronger than your potential growth, it means that your inflow into the budget, so public finance revenues, are de facto unrealistically high. And if you then adjust the expenditure to this, then of course you might face in a situation of a downturn, and please, I'm not talking about the crisis. It can go down the GDP for, let's say, 2%. You will have a very quickly the reduction, the fall of the revenues, but the expenditures are there. So we will again face a deficit, maybe not. We have more buffer now than in 2007, but conceptually, not much has changed on the side of the government.
I don't want to sound political, but do you think it's even potentially possible in the current constellation of coalition and extra coalition that we can actually go to a stronger reform in times needed? Is it even feasible to do that in the current constellation? I don't want to be political, I just want to be practical.
I would just say one thing. If you have 5 members of the coalition, it is by definition an expensive coalition. Mm-hmm. Expensive coalition, because there are too many members which you have to satisfy. Obviously, there are some of the parties in this coalition which, in case that something would happen in terms of re-election, that they are simply afraid that they would get out of the parliament. So, of course, I think it's a basis for today's coalition is the fact that I would say 3 coalition partners are simply afraid of elections, and that's, in my view, how the coalition is kept together.
Right. There is a very productive writer, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, who posed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. So which one should we tackle? What do you guys think? Which one? Is there one particular that you would like to answer? I'll let you choose. We did, right. But we didn't maybe tackle a little bit of transatlantic. I think it's very important also to open that issue. It's European Union and US, very important bridge. 2 biggest economies, if you combine them together by far, the trade relations. That importance, Nevenka, I would like you to comment on that, the importance of good and strong transatlantic relations. To wrap it up.
Maybe to start with. Whenever I come back from Far East, Singapore, Hong Kong, or China, and I land at one of the European airports, it's like I'm very happy to be back. But at my view always is that I'm coming back to a sleeping beauty, that a kind of I'm coming back to the past. And I think that Europe as a whole, we should be awake and follow the trends that are unavoidable. And I think that is as well for the connections between two biggest economies, Europe and the States.
Right.
I
Anybody
think
else?
that we are afraid of it.
We're not afraid. It's
kind.
quite turbulent right now.
Yeah.
Nobody's afraid. I
Yeah.
mean, that is the
Yeah.
strongest.
Yeah.
That is the strongest tie we have. Now, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous has posed them on the screen. Is there anybody else who is less anonymous who would like to raise your hand, ask our distinguished panel a question, maybe make a statement to kind of wrap our very interesting debate up? Please. Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Guy Delaunay. I work for the BBC. Haven't you got an issue here with political leadership? Because you're talking about how important it is to gain migrant workers of varying skill levels, and yet you've got the largest party campaigning flagrantly on an anti-migrant ticket, and incidentally not improving their share of the vote by doing so. It's the same as it always was, but it doesn't help to have that sort of talk around what's, in essence, an existential issue for Slovenia and the way of life that you have here. So where are the leaders going to come from who've got the courage to lead and to sell this message to the people of Slovenia?
Please. Thank you very much.
I think that the election system needs to be changed first, because you need to have a strong mandate. You need to have a strong mandate. You know, current government doesn't have a strong mandate, therefore, you know, have to do too much to horse trades, you know, to be able to do anything, simply. You know, and without change of election system, I doubt that there is going to be in a foreseeable future a government with a mandate. And then, of course, the nation will decide whether, you know, we want to go more populistic or we want to go more democratic or whatever, you know, this is. But, and then we also have to decide, Singapore way, we want to have the best talent in governmental structures, which means you don't pay the Prime Minister 3,000 euro.
Thank you very much. Any other question, Aisha?
And with that, I guess we are coming to an end. I would like to thank you, Jaka, for great work as always, all the panelists for a passion and the vision you gave us. And with that, I would also like to tell you that AmCham Slovenia has a platform of young people. More than 1,200 of them are already there. And just yesterday, we called the think tank of these young people Snowball. It's not a think tank, it's Center of Optimism. And they were discussing yesterday what they lack. And they were saying leadership, not only in politics, also in business. They were saying meritocracia, help me in English.
Meritocracy.
Thank you for saying it. They lack that. And they would like to see it more in Slovenia. They were saying about globalism, that we are not seeing it. They were saying how important it is to open up, but still know that we live in the best country in the world. And you know that I always end with that it's the only country with love in the name, which is important. But also it is important that on 17th of April, these young people will organize business breakfast as such, together with the Faculty of Economics, Center of Excellences. And what they want to talk about is how to do the prototype of country for talents. And I really urge you all, business, representative of state, academia, civil society, and of course, all of those who feel that you have talents, young or old, to be in this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hvala lepa.